I'm so glad we have this platform for you to expunge this from your system. Everything has consequences. This is not limited to just the world of media, any media.
So if Luke Bateman, for example, is recommending a book, I probably wouldn't take it very seriously.
You have one bone to pick with blurbs. I have two bones. A raging boner to pick. Is this also because you were sent an arc, asked to be reviewed, didn't give it 5 stars, and got blocked by the author?
That could it could influence my position on this a little bit.
Do you know what I mean? Like, this has always existed. It exists in every single profession. Backlash happens, right? I don't know why this entire time I was connected to my phone's audio. My phone, which I've never done. I have no idea how this happened.
I got 165 pages into the 400 odd page book.
Yes.
And I just hated almost every minute. It's been a busy morning, but I'm ready to get into it.
Has it been a busy morning? What have you been up to?
Well, honestly, I had to do my face and everything to get ready for this, but after that, I did actually do some work.
Okay, good.
I even cut my hair,
Yeah, good. It's looking great. I love the new style. This as much. Also, my chair I have to oil it. Keeps making a lot of noise. I keep forgetting that it does that. But anyway, it's all right.
When you fix it in post.
Sure. Yeah, like it just every single time I move, like I'm gonna have to be very still for this episode. Right. Yeah, it's been, and you know what? It's been just a weird week as well, because so many of the things that I had planned for the week have not gone according to plan. And including today, and which is why we're recording this a little bit later than I wanted to, but it's been insanely hot, like really, really, really warm. I actually have no idea why I'm in the sweater. Like,
it's a good question.
Yeah, but it's been, the house is pretty cool, but it's been really, really just insanely hot. So it's been like just tough to even keep the grass alive.
It's quite warm today. I've got airflow going, but I might end up putting the air conditioning on. We'll see what happens. Do I hate the environment? No, but I just want to be comfortable.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, screw the next generation. Who needs them?
Well,
okay. Well, don't bring you being a father into the conversation. Right. Let's start. What's on your mind today?
What's on my mind today? My mind today is on a recent controversy around ratings. And it's such a subjective thing, because if you speak to anyone who reviews books, they will have their own internal methodology of how and why they rate things. And I totally think that ratings themselves are a subjective thing. But when you have every man and their dog and every woman and their cat talking about this book being a 5-star book and 100 books being a 5-star book, it sort of makes me question whether 5 stars has lost its meaning. In fact, it's gotten to the point now where people started using 6 stars to indicate books that are truly exceptional to their point of view. And I'm starting to wonder if the whole system's a bit broken. So I know you personally don't necessarily have a strict star rating system that you apply to every book all the time, because consistency is problematic. But when we talk about reviewers and people who review books in a public forum, what is the point of their review? And what is the point of their rating, if not to, in a manner of speaking, educate the people about what books they should or shouldn't read? And if you give every book 5 stars, then in the words of whatever his name is from The Incredibles, no book's 5 stars.
Well, that is true. I'm going to just address your anti-feminist agenda attributing, cats to women straight away. I don't know what the point is. As you say, I don't have a system that I remain very faithful to, only because I think more often than not, what happens when you're reviewing is, or for a lot of people at least, is people tend to review emotionally, right? More than objectively. But and really not speak to the book on its own merits, and much more to do with whether or not a book was even just for them. They might have just picked up the book because it was hyped. They read the book, it wasn't for them, therefore 2 stars, and that kind of never sits well with me. But also, it is very different reviewing different types of books, right? And I'm not just talking about just purely on genre, if you're doing literary fiction to science fiction and fantasy or whatever, because, it could be nonfiction, poetry, whatever it may be. It becomes very subjective how one, even trying to be objective, then reviews a book on its own merits. Also, who am I is what I think. Who am I to be espousing criticism, usually, because I don't have a particular degree in writing. I did creative writing, but most of it was for script writing. So, I don't believe I have the experience nor the knowledge to be able to, in any way, be thought of as some sort of barometer for what is good and what isn't good literature. And oftentimes, the things that I enjoy the most are terrible literature. So if I was judging them objectively, which I also do, and often don't recommend to other people unless I know them quite well and think they would enjoy it, I would think of them as a 2-star read or a 1-star read sometimes even. But it doesn't mean that I didn't enjoy it to its maximum extent. And on the other hand, there's a lot of books that I think are conceptually really well crafted, but it just wasn't for me. But it doesn't also mean that then I would then give it 2 stars. But then that objective point of view is really rare in any sort of media rating for anything. So for movies, for music, for, it's really difficult. It's really rare that you actually encounter that other than from actual critics. And as we now know, well, especially now that, everything is so live on the internet, even critics can be so subjective depending on what agency kind of also owns wherever the critique is being published, right? Because there's a lot of, especially in movies, there's a lot of newspapers that are basically, if not owned, then at least the people that are within the newspaper are managed by the same PR agencies and booking agencies that a particular movie studio also uses. And so it becomes a conflict of interest that if you don't really dig, you kind of don't know. And if you dig long enough, you'll understand that you can't really trust many people, which then goes to what you look for. What do you look for out there? Do you look for reviews that are objective and therefore you try to and is that how you then follow your reading? Or do you kind of start subscribing to people that you just through experience from maybe looking at an opinion of a certain book? I can give you an example, actually. So a lot of times for a particular type of subsection of fantasy, I look to, I don't know why, this entire time, I was connected to my phone's audio. My phone, which I've never done. I have no idea how this happened. So this was very weird. And then this is asking me, oh, how was your, this whole thing, how was your studio section? So we're still recording. I don't understand. It's just very, very strange. But anyway, this seems to be all right. So for a particular subsection of fantasy, I really look to Elliot, a popular booktuber called Elliot Brooks. And so for certain things in the certain subgenre, we kind of share the same tastes. So if she says it's really good or she'll really enjoyed it, regardless of how good it is actually, if she says she really enjoyed it, then I follow that, and more often than not, I will enjoy it as well. And it has nothing to do with whether or not technically the book is good. It's just, that's where I think the duality exists, because then that's where emotional reviewing is,
Yes. And it gets to one of the interesting questions of, is a 5-star book 5 stars because it is a literary masterpiece, or is it a 5-star book because you really enjoyed it? I got a lot of flack last year for rating Solo Leveling so high, because even though they're not the best written thing on the planet, I inhaled all 8 volumes in the space of a week, and I thoroughly enjoyed the story and the journey I went on. So did it deserve as high of a rating as I gave it? I did ultimately lower it. I do my 6-monthly review and go back and say, okay, was that an emotional decision or was that an objective decision? I still rated it highly, but no one's going out there and saying that Solo Leveling is the same level of literary merit as The Road, for example. And so when we go back to this initial question of what are star ratings actually for, are they consumer guidance? If you look at the Amazon rating, is it author support? If you say, I really like this book and I want to recommend it to everyone who listens to me. Is it personal like I use it more for, like, I was recording the information anyway. And so I decided, I might as well publish what I've done so that maybe someone else will benefit. To your point, there may be people out there who say, well, I liked those books that David rated really highly. What other books has he written highly so I can go look at that? But those goals can often conflict. And we've got to be conscious of the fact that if you're looking at Amazon, and well, not you, because you are potentially a different kind of bite, but if the average person is looking on Amazon and sees a 5-star rating versus the 3-star rating, regardless of how many ratings there are, that is likely to inform their view as a consumer in a fairly dramatic way. And there was a really interesting discussion last week in real time, who knows when this is going to be published, from a man named Noah Brisk, who has he has YouTube now, he has Instagram and all the rest of it, where he made the point that if you like an indie book and if you want to support an indie author and you liked the book, that's a very important caveat here, you need to rate it 5 stars. Now, this drew immediate criticism from some people and support from others, because this idea of, well, if it's a 3.5 or a 4-star, I can still enjoy it, but I need to rate it 5 stars for the algorithm, is such an interesting concept that has been created and in a sense perpetuated by the almost conflict of interest that exists between Goodreads and Amazon. So Amazon owns Goodreads and feeds in, purchase recommendations from people going to Goodreads pages. Obviously, if you're an indie author, you want as many 5-star reviews on your site as you can get, because that'll ultimately hopefully result in purchases. But as a reviewer and as an influencer, is your mandate to give an objective review of a star rating, or a subjective review of how much you enjoyed the book and try to influence people to go for just an enjoyment factor rather than a literary merit factor?
Is this also because you were sent an arc, asked to be reviewed, didn't give it 5 stars, and got blocked by the author?
That could it could influence my position on this a little bit. But I didn't enjoy the book, so that's why I didn't rate it 5 stars. Now, if I had enjoyed the book, would I have rated it higher than my normal rating would be for a trad pub book that I've just picked off the shelf? I personally wouldn't. But I see my role and the role of influencers generally, certainly people with more followings than I've got, to say it doesn't matter what the star rating is. I liked this book for these reasons. And if you like those things, you should try this book. And if you like this, try this style of influencing is now getting quite popular. People are saying, hey, everyone's looking at Dungeon Crawler Carl. Here are 7 more lit RPGs that you should probably try out. Now, lit RPG has probably been one of probably the second most vilified genre after romantasy, really, when you get down to it from a critical perspective. Because there are a lot of really terrible lit RPGs out there. But that does not mean that there are not A, good and well-written lit RPGs, and B, that there are not a large number of very enjoyable lit RPGs out there.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing. I think the argument gets ballooned because when the subject matter is in the spotlight, because the reality is there's a lot of bad out there, a lot of bad of everything, any kind, any genre, right? I understand. Look, I am firmly against the argument that you should be I don't know what the opposite of review bombing is. But whatever tell me.
Ballooning?
Sure. Review ballooning. I am firmly against it the same way that I'm obviously against review bombing as well, right? Because things should stand on their own merit. It should the value should be attributed. And look, the argument for objective reviewing and emotional reviewing, I mean, we could dissect it for such a long time, and we could look at many examples of it. But it would be very difficult to get everyone to agree on style of reviewing. So in the very least, is if you are reviewing it objectively, or if you're reviewing it emotionally, at least do it, or a bit of both, at least do it with some sort of...
If you say, this is how I review and this is why I review, and you consistently hold to that, then as long as people know what they're getting into, then that's fine. But if you hold yourself out as an amazing critic who gives honest reviews, but then for indie authors you have a slightly different methodology, that I think breaks the trust of your audience and goes against what you're trying to accomplish.
Yeah, but I think as long as you're coming from a place of honesty, I think that in the end that's what matters the most, right? You know, so many reviews, and again, this is across genres, so many reviews are basically one line going, "Oh my God, I died."
Yeah, I hate that. If these books were killing people, there would be a Ring-style movie about the book that kills people from them reading it, or almost a Monty Python-esque, the joke that was too lethal.
Yeah. So I think that is for me that is a huge problem. But sometimes people just give 5 stars, and don't justify it at all. They just don't give any sort of text. I actually prefer the opposite. I prefer when people, if they don't want to, I guess, influence the rating when they actually review, and I guess I'm talking about Goodreads specifically, or Amazon, when they actually review, and go through the trouble of actually jotting down their opinion on the work, but then don't give any stars. You know, that I respect more than the opposite.
What about when the review is longer than the novel?
Look, it is an interesting thing, I gotta say. I've gone through the rabbit hole, not many times, but I have gone through the rabbit hole of going through people's reviews that are not just long, but extremely elaborate in the way that they are constructed, because they involve a lot of mixed media.
Mixed media, quotes from the book.
Yes, it is very interesting. Yeah, but to be fair, I mean, it speaks to, I guess, a beautiful example of how passionate people are about the book, right?
Yeah.
But it is, I mean, I'm not sure it wouldn't be something that would that I would dive into to help me decide whether or not I'm going to purchase this book, because it's a lot. Sometimes it feels like a longer commitment than reading the book itself.
Well, it's interesting because I've dramatically adjusted the way in which I go about books these days, in the sense that I only read books on personal recommendations now, and I never read the blurb anymore. So I've gone into every book I've read for the past 6 months or so completely blind. No understanding of what the book's about, other than perhaps what you can glean from the cover, which is often dangerously misleading. And I've just gone into the book and said, okay, what is this? Well,
that segues into our next topic, blurbs.
And I have a bone to pick with blurbs, because
Good.
I believe one of the first discussions you and I ever had was there was a blurb recommendation from Adrian Tchaikovsky on one of the worst books I've ever had the misfortune to read. I got 165 pages into the 400-odd page book.
Yes.
And I just hated almost every minute. But there was Adrian Tchaikovsky.
What the book was?
It was called Echo Rising.
Okay, I have no idea what that is.
Yeah,
I'm sure you told me at the time, and I still don't know.
Science fantasy. It was edgy main characters in a science cyberpunk futuristic universe, then somehow ends up in a fantasy world.
Okay, apologies to the author. We shall not be putting the cover on screen.
But it's one of those interesting questions of, if an author gives a blurb, are you obliged to include a link somewhere to the full blurb? Or do you just have to put, because this was just one line, which I don't think was in itself wrong. But I'm sure that if you read the rest of the blurb, Adrian would have said something along the lines of, this was a catastrophic clusterfuck, and it was a bit extreme.
So Adrian would not have said that.
Okay,
I don't know Adrian, nor do I speak for Adrian, but Adrian would not have said that. But I'm assuming that, when you are hired, when you are within the
publishing economy.
Yes, but Adrian is lucky enough to publish through quite a few imprints, right? And I guess sometimes that's part of the gig, but also what Adrian likes doing, we're not picking on Adrian. We love Adrian. But what Adrian likes doing is showcase new voices as well. He does that for a lot of people. And I think that's commendable. It does fly very close to the same argument of, review ballooning, though. When you kind of just pushing something out there, giving its best shot, perhaps not deservedly. But I find that you have one bone to pick with blurbs. I have two bones. Okay. A raging boner to pick. So number one is, yes, the fact that often you will go and find a writer that it happens much more to me when I'm actually at the bookshop and I'm just going through books, because maybe I'm paying more attention to the covers and everything. And I'm going, and often I find, so-and-so has blurbed this. And so many authors that I really respect and enjoy and have complete collections of, will blurb an author that I've never heard of, and obviously that does in the moment at the bookshop much more than if I'm looking through online. Okay, but at the bookshop, and I'm a bit of a captive market, and it does influence me. I gotta say, it has influenced me a few times, more than a few times. But the second bone, and sometimes it has been successful, and oftentimes it has not been successful. But the second bone I have to pick is blurbs ruining my cover. They're just in the middle of the cover. They're just as bad as stickers. I'm sorry. Or the non-sticker sticker.
Yeah,
right?
They're not as bad as they're better than stickers.
Some stickers.
Sorry. They're worse than stickers and better than the printed on stickers. Because at least stickers you can arguably remove. And I think I'll add a third bone I think we can pick after you've addressed this point in detail. But it is interesting. And so Echo Rising is the first time I've ever seen a blurb on a spine, which I thought was a very interesting tactic, because not every book is
spine of the book.
Yeah.
Oh my god.
Literally a blurb by Adrian Tchaikovsky on the top of the spine of this book.
No. That's emotional blackmail. No, that's giving. I don't know what that's giving. That's horrible.
I've never seen it anywhere else than this book.
No, I don't even. I'm stunned. I don't know what that is.
Yeah. But let's.
Were they trying to pull the rug from under this author?
I think honestly it was just a goal of, this book will probably never have a face-forward spot on a bookshelf. But if someone's browsing a bookstore and sees the spine, they see, blurb by Adrian Tchaikovsky.
You really thought about this. Okay.
I've been ruminating on it for at least 2 years now.
Okay.
Can we just address this third question of, when a blurb is written by someone who nobody knows or should be expected to know? Now, famous authors, and you've already addressed the point that if an author recommends another book to you on a blurb, it might influence your decision making in a bookstore. But I'm sympathetic to the fact that indie authors may not have that. But is there any benefit to a blurb from person X Amazon reviewer on your book?
No.
Because for all I know, you are person X on
No. There is no benefit. I'm sorry. There is no benefit even for a booktuber to be on the blurb. Sorry. There just isn't.
Booktube is interesting because on the one hand, if you are one of their, some of these people have millions of followers, some have hundreds of thousands, some tens of thousands.
Okay.
So if Luke Bateman, for example, is recommending a book, I probably wouldn't take it very seriously. If Alicia Fortune's recommending a book, I probably would take it seriously. They're very different audiences. But is that enough to justify putting on a printed novel that's going to be sold around the world?
It's not. It doesn't matter who it is. I'm sorry. It doesn't matter who it is. Like, you have arguably the most famous, booktuber, Jack Edwards, right? I don't care. I don't, because again, especially at that point when you read so much and you review so much, the chances of your recommendations hitting with me specifically as an individual is just going to be, a toss of a coin. It doesn't really matter because you read a lot for your work, but I have a particular taste level. So it's much more likely that I'll enjoy something if it is in the vein of an author's preferred creation style as well. You know what I mean? So, and I think it needs to make sense, in fact, because sometimes you will also have an author blurbing a book of a subgenre that they might really enjoy as a reader. But to me, it makes no sense because the setting, the type of writing, the type of storytelling is completely divorced of who the author is, who the blurbing author is as an authorial voice. So things need to kind of make sense. But I blame publishers, I got to say.
Well, I feel like this is the point. They've got to have something. This is the fundamental question. Is it better to have a blurb from a nobody nothing Amazon reviewer or have no blurbs at all? I think customers expect blurbs now. Like even if you or I would say, I don't listen to a blurb by a person I don't know and don't recognize the name of or whatever, I think that the average consumer wants to see a blurb so that there is someone else out there, arguably independently, telling them this book has good things about it and you should read it. That's something that we as consumers now are almost... like, we are trained to expect that when we look at a book, when we look at an Amazon listing, even on the Amazon website. Like, if I just got a thing which was this is the blurb of the book and there was nothing else about it, no mention from authors or reviewers or anything, it was just, here it is. That would be unusual to me, I think. I don't ever read them. Like, I can't tell you the last time I actually read a blurb from whether it's famous author or other reviewer on the page. But my brain instinctively looks to see that they're there. I don't really care. I really don't. It's just, it adds nothing to me. We need to stop this. We need to stop with blurbing. It's much more useful. In fact, as well, it makes, other than the experience of being at the store as a captive audience and really looking at the cover or the back. Sometimes you have multiple quotes, right? Looking at it and maybe finding an author you like that enjoyed it. Other than that, there's really no point. And if that exists, then it needs to make sense. It needs to be an author within the same genre that liked it. And I was influenced a couple of times even this week, I gotta say. I'm saying all of this, and it definitely worked on me twice this week. Okay, it really did. Because it was twice this week, it was the rare instances where it was done well. But the blurb is not on the book. The blurb, and we're getting there. So, other than the captive audience, when you move to where most people really now interact with bookish culture, right, which is online, then immediately you kind of come to an understanding that you don't need to put these things on the printed page, right? You can just blurb it on the listing, which is where what happened to me in terms of being successfully influenced by the publisher twice this week, because I bought a debut crime novel that's coming out, I think, in April, because 2 or 3, it was blurbed 6 times, I think, on the listing. And 3 of those 6 were authors that I regularly buy crime novels from, right? So that made total sense. And the other one was a literary fiction novel, which is not a debut, but I think it's a second or third novel from this person. I've never heard of
her before. But another person, another author that is also within the literary fiction space that I also like and respect, blurbed the listing. So it was easy for me to just engage with that. And I still went back and forth a little. That one wasn't a sure thing. I actually then had to dive a little bit deeper and see whether or not I wanted to really buy it. But it did influence me. But I don't need that on the book. I really don't need that on the book. It makes no sense. And I definitely don't need it if the person blurbing doesn't make sense contextually. And I definitely don't need it if it is a X, YZ reader or booktuber. I just, no.
So let's talk about the fact that you're influenced. How does that tie into this sort of new world order we're getting in two different ways? One is where authors are becoming content creators on booktube, booktok, bookstagram. And now I'm seeing just so many bookstagrammers and others turning author. So they're using the networks and the influence they got as influencers to then say, well, actually, I'm writing a novel now. I mean, you criticized the Luke Bateman contract when it was first announced, I think, and I think many people were a bit cautious of like, okay, this guy, bachelor rugby star, now book reviewer, gets a novel deal straight out of the gate. And there was many people looking at that at the time. We can sort of leave it to the side for now. But when we start going into this murky world, can you fairly review your peers and competitors? So is it...
You can fairly review your peers and competitors if you, again, come from a place of honesty and you're not afraid of potential backlash or cancel culture. You can fairly do it. But obviously, everything has consequences. This is not limited to just the world of media, any media. Do you know what I mean? Like, this has always existed. It exists in every single profession. Backlash happens, right? That's why a lot of doctors don't step on other doctors' toes, because they want to kind of play within the system. So it happens in every single business, and it's a risk you take, because obviously as a booktuber that wants to be an author, or as an author that just wants to widen their platform and be a content creator, then there is a very simple avenue to take to avoid the pitfall, which is only talk about things you like. You don't have to talk about things you don't like. You don't have to do that. You can just not talk about them. And people can basically assume that you either don't want to, or perhaps you didn't like it. And you can just focus on positivity, which, to be fair, a lot more people should focus on positivity. There's too much negativity already out there, right? We say this, and I spend so much time ranting about Sun Eater.
Well, this is actually a very interesting point, and it's something that I've heard from a number of bookstagrammers I've spoken to recently, where they've said, I don't post negative reviews. And I think that there is such an interesting dynamic that happens here when you talk then about what is the harm spectrum. So is a negative review only negative if you shit on it? Or is it negative if you say, oh, it wasn't for me, or I didn't like it personally? How many caveats do you need to say, I will post a negative review, but it's not so negative? Like, if I talk about Echo Rising, I say it was a DNF because of, I can give you a litany of issues I had with it. It is an issue I have with it, both from a fundamental construction perspective and also from, every aspect of it when I was reading it made me unhappy about reading it.
I'm so glad we have this platform for you to expunge this from your system.
But then you talk about some other books I've given sort of even passing grades to, or low credit ratings to. There are elements of them I still liked, but they're not good enough for me to then be publicly saying everyone should read this. So if you're an influencer, at what point do you draw the line and say, that is too negative for me to talk about on my platform? And what is the impact in the sort of echo chamber you then create by not having negative reviews.
No, you should. The thing is, I just think that there's a lot more negative than there is positive. I'm not saying that people... So, let's park this a moment. My advice was for booktubers that want to be authors and authors that want to just be content creators as well, right? That's just the risk you take. If it was me, I would be negative when I feel like I should be negative no matter what, because, you know, I guess in a way I tend to be a little bit more self-destructive. But I also because I think you should come from a place of honesty. So when it comes to just content creators, right? Reviewers, booktubers, whatever, bookstagrammers, you name it. I just think that you should just be honest. I don't think you should just seek only have negative reviews or only have positive reviews. You should just review. And if it is positive, it's positive. If it's negative, it's negative. I understand that often people play to the algorithm, right? And of course, negative reviews, you know, they're punchy, they're rage baity sometimes, you know? So of course it works for the algorithm, but I also think people get tired of it, you know, and then just tune out. Because a lot of times, even if the negative review is coming from a place of honesty and you're just focusing on putting negative reviews out there, regardless of how honest they may be, often the book is the same and the review is the same, because you are choosing to basically criticize from where you stand. A lot of the times you're reading a lot of similar things, and if you're not liking these 6 or 7 books, chances are that they're actually quite similar books with similar problems. But even if they're not, they're going to have things that are commonalities. And when you're putting that type of content out there, so often people are just going to also tune out.
Also, let's be honest, if you are getting consistently negative reviews out there, you're probably reading consistently bad books. And what quality of life do you have?
Yes. So there is a booktuber that I really like called Rachel. And I really like Rachel. Okay. And I just think her videos are, is it Reads with Rachel? I think so. Anyway, I just think her content is really, really funny, but kind of well thought out. But it is often very negative, because it does serve, I guess, as a warning. Please don't read this. Or, you know, I read it so you don't have to type of content. But I keep thinking, Rachel, what is your life that you're reading all of these terrible books? Like, you know, because actually, but what it does though, is when she likes a book, I buy it immediately, because I think, well, it passed the Rachel grading system, you know, one pull through, which is how I actually ended up reading The Everlasting, which is awesome. So anyway, but I think that it is a bit of like, it makes you think a bit. What are these people doing? What is their life that they constantly read these terrible books? And I hope at least they're skimming them, you know, or listening to them at 3 times speed. But anyway,
it is to go back to the point then.
Take us back.
Should we say that only content creators who do not propose to become authors should have this rule, and as soon as you start becoming an author, you need to respect the unwritten rule that you can't negatively review other authors' work for sake of feelings? Like,
no. And again, that's what I'm saying. No, just be honest. And if you don't wish to be honest, then just don't put it out there. You know, I just think authors have this very, very kind of close community. There's a lot of echo chamber of authors on social media, and authors promoting authors and authors promoting authors, which I guess is really good in a way, because it means that you have a supportive community, right, of other people that know what you're going through, or can understand where you are because they've been there, and maybe show you a way to, if they are successful authors, show you a way on how to achieve that based on their own experience, and perhaps through that you'll avoid some pitfalls. All of that.
But where's the line?
But that's the thing. I don't think there is one. if that's what you're going to dip into and partake in. If the minute you start becoming a reviewer and you want to I just think that a lot of times those are not just the only avenues. Authors can do a lot of things in terms of content creation that has nothing to do with giving grades to books. The possibilities are infinite. You can be topical like we are, you can just have discussions. You can interview other authors, you can platform other people. You can also talk about completely, internet loves weird. You can go against grain, find a niche and talk about things that are completely unrelated to the work you do as an author. You know what I mean? And also be an author. There's this popular Australian, I think from Melbourne, but extremely popular, massively popular artist and so craft tuber, but artist tuber. I don't know the name. I don't know the nomenclature for artist tuber. Okay, but Jazza, right? Super famous, amazing at what he does, right? Seems like a cool bloke. He's now an author, right? He wrote a book and promotes it, but his platform is art, and that he does. So two things can happen concurrently. So you can grow your platform through that. I just think that a lot of times authors don't think it through in terms of what they can do to be able to grow their platform rather than just feed into the same echo chamber. Yeah. Let's take a break.
So this month being February, I undertook to read 12 books recommended to me by 12 friends. And I was lucky enough that the first book I randomly selected from the 12 that were recommended to me was Parable of the Sower by Octavia E. Butler. And it was shocking to me that I hadn't read this book before, because when I was in high school, as part of my English major work, I wrote a short story set in a post-apocalyptic world, effectively. But my justification for doing that was that I read some 80 or 90 apocalyptic and post-apocalyptic books in preparation for that. So my research for my short story was to read everything I could find. I defined apocalypses down to 13 different kinds, ranging from ecological catastrophe to aliens, act of God, meteor, and there's a science you can apply to the whole thing. But I didn't read Parable of the Sower, and I wish I had, because for a book published in 1993 and set in 2025, 2026, 2027, it is so persuasive about what the state of the world will be in just a few short steps from where we find ourselves now. Looking 32 years into the future, she made various predictions about things that would happen. And she lent, I think, on the catastrophic, catastrophizing angle. But honestly, sitting here in Australia, I look at things that are happening around the world and go, damn, she wasn't far off. And we are only a few really terrible decisions from getting to the point where some of the things in the book will become reality if they are not already. It's interesting because there is a sequel, but for a duology, it falls into that category of duologies where you don't have to read the second book, and so very few people have. I think that I will read the second book soon. I've got other books I need to get through first, but the nature of the story, I think, could have just been sold as a standalone novel, and possibly, I will say after reading the second book, I wish it had been. But she touches on race relations, she touches on politics, she touches on science fiction elements about, where is the future of humanity? And she does so in a very gripping way. It feels very much like The Road, but it predates The Road by, I think, 12 years. So, Cormac McCarthy has a lot to answer for at this point. I rated it very highly. I very much enjoyed it.
Okay, we're back. So, our last topic today. Take it away, David.
Discoverability. So, how do people find books today? You got so many different categories of people who fall into this, but there are still, to this day, consumers who just walk into a bookshop and rely upon the recommendation from the bookstore employees. And they'll say, oh, here is a blurb sitting on a shelf that says Janet from the team recommends this book. You should.
I love those. Fucking love those.
They're great. I mean, assuming you trust the person or you know their taste, etc.
Who wouldn't trust Janet?
But I think that if we look at the general mass of books that are sold, the other pipelines that I'll now look into are more prevalent. So, first of all, publishers pushing existing authors. If you have read, Iron Flame, you'll read Onyx Storm, and you'll see it everywhere because you know that she's written another book. And it's hard to escape that kind of thing. Reviewers in the traditional media, so newspapers, even the AFR and the SMH still publish reviews of books every now and again, but it's not a consistent thing. I think that BookTok, booktube, Goodreads, and Amazon, well, specifically Goodreads is part of Amazon. I'd love to know what percentage of book sales in America, Australia, what we're going to call the Western world or the English-speaking world, those platforms account for in terms of how much it drives actual sales.
I guess you'd have to speak to authors about this, David. I think a lot of people, I don't know, we're playing a guessing game here, but I think that walking into a shop, not necessarily a bookshop, but a lot of other shops sell books, right? And have big enough sections where they have a particular type of range of books. Your Kmart's, your Targets, your Walmart's, etc. Right? I think people walking in and looking at the shelves is still how most people, the casual reader certainly, will discover books. But also, there's a lot of, if you are an online shopper, there's a lot of websites that recommend books to you based on previous purchases. So it becomes, that's always been the case, right? So it becomes quite easy for you to then, I remember even, 20-something years ago, when I was buying, at the time I was living in Europe and buying from, where I lived, you really didn't have that much choice. Certainly not in books written in English. So I bought a lot of books from Amazon UK. And even at the time, it just kept recommending books based on my purchases, even when I was saving them to lists, right? And so a lot of the authors that I read now are because of that. And if that was true then, it certainly would be even more true now, just based on, how things have gone with the use of social media. So I just think nowadays more and more people get into things because of either the retailer that they use, or then they just base it off, what's popular on BookTok.
Well, the BookTok is an interesting one because it comes in two flavors. So there are people who actually watch on TikTok and look at BookTokers and get recommendations from them. But then what we've now found is if you look at Amazon listings, a lot of the time they'll say the BookTok sensation, XYZ.
Yes, and sometimes that's, again, printed on the fucking cover.
Yeah. And it's a fascinating thing that I reckon if you'd asked anyone 2, 3, 4 years ago, TikTok recommended this book, they'd probably say, well, don't read it then. What are you doing? Whereas now it's becoming a main source of influence or recommendations for a large number of people.
Yeah, and then there's the cross of that, because you go into, I don't know if they still have it, but I remember walking into Dimmicks, and which for anyone who's not Australian, just a very large, it's like the Borders or the Waterstones, but in Australia.
Barnes & Noble for the American audience.
Barnes & Noble. You walked in, and there was this entire display right at the entrance I think it was actually a shelving unit. It wasn't just a display of booktok recommendations, and there was a sign, and it didn't look like a temporary sign, and it was just like, and that's just wild, man. That's really, really wild. That even at the shop, people would go to the shelf that would basically be the mirror image of what they could see on booktok as recommendations if they're following that type of content.
Except that in this instance, the store gets to make the choice of which booktok sensations are we going to push, and that creates, it gets. There's so many layers to this now, because you have not only that question of, well, what does the retailer want to push from a booktok sensation perspective, but you also really, in looking at just booktok sensations, you miss the entire point of the booktok algorithm, which is that each individual from using TikTok will get recommendations based upon their interests and the people they follow. So to say something is a booktok recommendation is as good as saying, well, this has 500,000 Goodreads reviews and it puts it at this, because it's lacking completely nuance.
Yeah.
Will it work for the majority of people? Maybe, but I don't think there's any sort of safety in that either. I think that these sorts of things sort of, now I feel like the old man yelling at a cloud, like just saying, oh, it misses nuance, it doesn't have any personality, the recommendations are flavorless. It's like recommending someone a restaurant. If I don't know what you like, what's the point of me telling you to go eat Chinese food? Maybe you're allergic to everything on the Chinese food menu. Maybe you've had it before and you didn't like it at all. Any recommendation needs to have context or it's meaningless.
Yes. Which is why often when you are recommending anything, as to a point you've made, even on this episode, if you like this, read this. Those really work because they immediately contextualize the work. But I just think that going back to how people discover books, it was funny because it used to be that, and it was the same here, but the same as there used to be these really great and I really miss them. These really great shows on TV about video games, right? Which, of course, everything is now translated into,
YouTube.
Things like This Week in Games by Skill Up or something like that, right? But that used to be basically on TV, usually on a Saturday or something like that, just before or after kids' cartoons, and that was pretty cool. But they also used to be segments, if not entire shows, about books. And people would sit down and would go through the new releases for the month or the week or whatever, and they would discuss them. And that was pretty cool. And I think that's how people really, other than going into a bookshop, that's how people discovered books. And then you obviously had all of the book critics that were printed on newspapers and magazines and all of that, whatever magazine or newspaper you subscribe to, you just go through it and see what books were out and what people thought of them, and get that perhaps instead as well. So
it's so interesting because it is something that, advanced reader copies used to be so exclusively for almost that elite group of people who were professional reviewers. And in a sense, the Instagram influencer market has democratized it a little bit. Now, there are hundreds of arcs going out.
Yes.
Across certain books.
Yes.
And we'll talk about arcs next episode, I think. But it is interesting because it's, I think, fundamentally changed the way publishers work. Like, arcs for books now are going out 6 months ahead of the actual publication date. Whereas, to your point, it used to be the case that you'd hear about a book a month, maybe 2 tops, before it was released. And you're like, oh, that's just about to come out. That's good. Whereas now you got, well, I know there's books coming out in September this year, which I pre-ordered.
Yeah. And if you're active on social media, obviously, and if you subscribe to, if you follow the publishers or the stores, I mean, you get alerted to things way ahead of time, right? So that's. But I guess that's not the majority of people, right? That's not how most people engage with reading. That's very much a niche part of the fandom, right? I think most people still just walk into a shop and there's a new book, and often it's accompanied by a specific display because the book's out and it's new, and or in every shop, every major shop, especially every dedicated bookshop, has usually a flat table or a display of new releases, right? And people would go and just skim it, and you can go through every week, just pop in, and 10 minutes is all it takes for you to kind of see what's new, and if it's something that you perhaps would go for. But I gotta say, my favorite is still How You Started. I really respect booksellers. And so having recommendations from booksellers on the shelf influences me more than anything, and also makes me discover books more than anything, because it's very visible, right? And I will go to the blurb, and therefore from the blurb to the book. So,
and let's be clear, for full disclosure for those watching and or listening, neither one of us is representative of the average book buyer.
No, I never buy books. So, speaking of that, now that we're ending the episode, let me show you what I bought.
Let's see it.
So this one arrived today. The other ones arrived yesterday. But I'm just going to spotlight 3. So I have now finally completed my Guy Gabriel Kay collection, because I was able to hunt down his book of poems.
Wow, that's in good condition too.
It is in perfect condition, which I'm very happy about. Shan't be tell you what I paid for it. And not even offline. Could not help but show.
Copies arrived. Mine's somewhere. I don't know where Booktopia have it right now, but it's apparently soon.
We should be able to actually voice it in case people are actually just podcasting this. So this is the Legends trilogy from Dragonlance. So Time of the Twins, Test of the Twins, War of the Twins. If you've never read Dragonlance, you should definitely read Dragonlance. And if you have read Dragonlance, you should go and reread Dragonlance. Okay.
I was going to say, when I reread Dragons of Wood and Twilight a week ago, I think anyone who plays Dungeons and Dragons should read it. If not because it's an amazing book, because in some cases it is
amazing.
It's rough around the edges in parts.
Yes,
but see,
that's emotional reviewing for me.
Yeah,
it is amazing. 5 stars.
But it has so much of things which a Dungeons and Dragons party should consider in how they act in it. This party gets captured a bunch. I don't know about you, but anytime I've been a dungeon master or been a player trying to capture the players, they immediately take the view that if they get captured, they're going to die, and so they might as well die fighting. And it limits your options as a dungeon master to move a story forward sometimes. And secondly, there is, we discussed this a bit off record, but Raceland and other characters in the books, there is disharmony within the party.
Yes.
And I think it's a really good example of what not to do, in the sense that even if it would be interesting from a story perspective, which it is in Dragonlance Chronicles, you should not have a Dungeons and Dragons party where the people have a lack of social cohesion. It is not a recipe for success. It's an interesting thing.
Yeah. I mean,
but
you're very biased about this, David, because you are more often than not the DM.
Yes. And I hate a lack of social cohesion in the players, because there's no fun if people don't like each other.
Yes, but you're also averse to conflict. So these two things combine. Not. Okay. All right. These two things combine, I think, probably inform a lot of your opinion. Because from a player perspective, as long as people understand that there is a shared goal that they need to keep moving towards, I think that a bit of you know, disturbance within the party is cool, and it makes for an interesting, you know, session or series of sessions, as long as people keep moving forward. I think that's the problem, because sometimes that can go off tangent so far and wide that then you accomplish nothing in the session.
Yes.
But yes, amazing. Okay. It's such a good story. It's such a good story. And it is a beautiful edition. I do have all of them, so I didn't obviously need this. But then, you know,
Nice
you
to
buy
have.
a lot of things you don't need.
Mm.
It's very nice to have. And I'm very happy I bought it. I also got
Very nice. My
Operation-
copy, again, is somewhere. I don't
House.
think...
Yeah.
Booktopia has a lot to answer for, put it that way.
Yeah. I shall be reading this this week. I think today, actually, I'll start this. It's a pretty easy read, so I'm pretty sure I'll finish it by tomorrow night or the day after. Because, as you also know, I got the latest Tyrant Philosophers entry from Adrian
Pretenders
Tchaikovsky.
to the Throne of God.
Correct, and I shall be reading that this weekend, and
Excellent.
I cannot wait.
I have to
Cannot
wait
wait.
until... Because you have thrown this gauntlet at me about making sure I finished all the Bound and the Broken by the 24th of March. And I've got to get through the books I'm reading currently for February before I even get to March.
Yes.
I don't know when I'm going to get to Pretenders. Probably after the 24th of March, which is a long way away.
Cool. Well, you have homework to do, David.
It's true. It's true. I was going to say, has your Murderbot arrived yet?
No, not yet.
So my Murderbot and my replacement Book 5 of Malazan have both arrived in Sydney as of last night, and I'm waiting patiently or impatiently for the notification saying when Australia's going to deliver them, or Australia Post is going to deliver them.
Knowing you impatiently would be my guess. Cool. Well, thanks to everyone that's listening. And if we're just screaming into the void, well, so be it.
We were going to scream into the void anyway.
Perfect. Sounds great. All right, subscribe.